For my background, I am from Poland. I moved to Ireland when I was quite young, and I have lived here for the majority of my life. I was always a very creative child. Ever since primary school, I was always drawing and painting and creating different texts and always listening to music and singing. And I knew from quite a young age that I would always have a draw to creativity. A lot of my work, especially this year, has focused on the feelings of childhood and nostalgia. Some of my recent pieces that come to mind are the piece titled Cartwheel, which is just about the joyous fun of being a child in a field and running around, and the way the limbs kind of move chaotically when performing a cartwheel. Another piece that comes to mind is Duck Duck Goose, which is a slightly more figurative piece of mine that was just quite a tongue-in-cheek, humorous piece about the childhood game of Duck Duck Goose. I think definitely my heritage and my background inspired a lot of my work this year. The main thing that comes to mind is the Hunt Museum exhibition that I got to be a part of thanks to being a student at LSAD. The second year painting class have an exhibition in the Hunt Museum called Origins in Harmony. And I was inspired by my own origins to create two pieces for the exhibition. One of them titled Smok, which is dragon in Polish, and it is inspired and includes many motifs from a old Polish folklore story about a dragon from Krakow that used to terrorize the general public. The second piece for that exhibition is titled Puka, which, as many people may know, is about the mischievous characters that often come up in Irish folklore. I do really feel connected to both my Irish and my Polish roots. And that has come up a lot in my work recently with the inclusion of just texts in both languages and different motifs from my heritage and my hometowns and a lot of the folklore that comes from both of those countries. Some of the things that definitely inspire me the most as an artist, of course, the themes of childhood and nostalgia come to mind. I guess just that feeling of being younger and absolutely like fearless and having so much fun in creating is something that I really want to imitate in my own work, and just make sure that I'm constantly having fun while I'm creating, make it feel less like a job and more just a passion that I get to play with on a daily basis. Definitely my heritage as well, which I had mentioned before. I do think I also take a lot of inspiration from nature, which I think a lot of artists do as well. Just the landscape around us, especially Ireland. We have such a beautiful country here, and we have so many incredible landscapes that just beg to be captured on pages and canvases. Another thing for me is music. I see live music very often, and that energy and the lighting and the colors and the feeling in that room when you're surrounded by people that are so connected, and the love for a singular thing is such a strong emotion that I definitely want to look into capturing more in my work. As for my biggest influences at the moment, I cannot help but bring up Aoife Colley and Beibhinn Eilish, both incredible artists who focus so much on folklore and heritage, and their style of work is quite different to mine. They definitely have a more design approach with their work, but I think the colors that they use in their work are absolutely fantastic, and the way they tackle issues of femininity and discuss folklore and heritage are just constantly captivating to me. As for what I'm focusing on right now in my work, I just finished my second year in college. Right before I finished my second year, I actually took on quite a big challenge for myself. I'm not really a portrait artist. I don't often paint faces or skin or hair or anything like that. And we had a little bit of free time right before we finished college, so I decided to really, really challenge myself. And I have done my largest piece to date. It's titled The Stars They Were Among My Dreams. It's 120 centimeters by 120 centimeters in size, so definitely a very large piece. It took just a little under a month to make, and it is quite a large self-portrait of just me sleeping on my pillow. I was looking at themes of sleep and dreams earlier in the year and wanted to return back to that because I do find something quite beautiful in sleep and in dreams, that they can be so calming and beautiful, and the brain works in incredibly funny ways, I think. And I have a lot of really vivid dreams often that I love putting into paintings. This painting is just my favorite thing I've done so far. It is incredibly colorful. It was such a joyful challenge to try and figure out a way to paint people that works for me. I love the color scheme of it so much. I love the inclusion of stars on it. And it was definitely a labor of love to create this piece. And now it's a skill that I can add to my wheelhouse as I continue working. My plans for the summer before I return to college are just to keep honing my craft, working more, definitely trying more portraits, maybe not on such a large scale over the summer. But just adding more to my wheelhouse and to my skills as I progress as an artist. I think one of the biggest challenges in being an artist is time. We're in such a place in the world right now where there's so much focus on constantly working, and I think the world becomes such a more fruitful and beautiful place when we as people start focusing less on 9-to-5 office jobs and focus more on doing our passions and doing what drives us. And I'm in a really privileged position at the moment to be studying art in college and have so much time to be in a studio space and to constantly be able to create more and more work. But I do grow more and more aware as time goes on that I will not always be in that position, where I might not always have a studio space and have supplies like readily available to me to be constantly creating art. And I think that is quite a big challenge and a big fear to think about what comes after. But I do think it is such an act of self-love and also discipline to make sure that you carve out time in your day to focus on creating art and focus on your passion. I also think another challenge, definitely, and we hear this word a lot, like imposter syndrome, and constantly being afraid of failure and trying new things because they might not always work out or the piece might not turn out the way that you want it to. But I think it's always really important to push yourself despite the fear of failure, because at the end of the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work out the way you want to and you've learned from that, or you gain a new skill that you can add to your wheelhouse as an artist. But there are definitely a lot of challenges to being an artist, and it's a topic that I could go on for much longer. As for advice that I would give to my younger self, at least relating to art, is definitely to, again, just push past my fears of worrying that things that might not turn out good. And I think definitely something that I've learned over time that I would have passed down to my younger self is to not always feel like I need to show everyone every single thing I make. I think a lot of the time, especially in such an age of social media, we feel like we constantly have to show people every single piece of art and work that we make, or we might fall into irrelevance or not get the engagement that we would like from our audiences. But that puts us into a box and a place of fear where we feel as though we might not always be able to try something new because it might not end up looking the best, and then we feel like we might have to show it to people, and that's not always the case. I definitely struggled a lot with my confidence in my art when I was younger, and it made me not pursue the craft as much, and it made me not want to develop my skills more. So I do wish I could look at my younger self and tell her that it's okay to practice and to fail and to learn, and just to give myself more time, and again, just carve out the time in my days and in my schedule to create art. I really love this question about unconventional practices in my work. I definitely, especially this year in college, I have found a new way to incorporate texture into my work, which I really like and feels very unique to me. I often find myself either mixing corn flour or sand into my oil paint. Both of these create such just beautiful, thick textures that you can put onto a canvas, and it really makes the work come out towards the viewer onto the canvas and dare them to come closer and look at all the grains in the texture, or the corn flour, which causes this beautiful creamy texture, which I found works really well for certain pieces. A piece that comes to mind when I'm talking about this is called I Wish I Could Sleep. It's another way of working that I found where if I have a theme, which at the time was of sleep and dreams, I love including loads of different random little motifs, almost like Easter eggs, I guess, for the viewer to find that if you stand there and you look at the piece enough and you hear the title, you can spot different things. I won't give everything away with this one, but for example, there's two different types of flowers in this piece. One of them is chamomile, the other one is Valium. Both of these are flowers that are known to help with sleep. There are also really washed out figures that represent different most common sleeping positions that people take. I mean, I could just go on, but that piece definitely includes a lot of those really thick textures that make the work so much more tactile and just add a lot of interest to my work. But I would definitely say my work with different textures is something that makes my work really unique and also unconventional. There is very rarely a time where I am working in complete silence when I'm painting. I love having different things to listen to while I work. A lot of time that would be music, usually more upbeat stuff, just so I keep my energy going, especially if I'm working on a larger piece. I do find some video game soundtracks often make it into my list as well of things to listen to. If I'm really hunkering down and working on something maybe a little bit of a slower pace, I will put on a show on Netflix that I have watched a million times so that I don't feel like I'm being taken away from my work. I can still focus on what I'm doing, but I can have some familiar noise. A lot of the time as well, if I am working in college, I would be just talking to my friends while I'm working just to fill the room with noise. I don't find working in silence particularly helpful to me. I find, especially if it's music that I'm listening to, I think it just fuels more creativity out of me to be listening to music while I work. The best reaction I've gotten to my work is quite a tough question, I think. I personally am really lucky to say that I have an absolutely incredible support system around me that constantly shows so much love and support for any endeavor that I pursue within my art. I have quite a simple philosophy when it comes to art, and that is that art is anything that evokes any kind of emotion from a person, really. So I think as long as I evoke any emotion from anyone who sees my art, I consider my job done. But I do think the odd time that children see my work, I do think I get some of the best reactions then. I think kids have such an incredible view on art. They have no preconceived notions about what art is or what art should look like. And they sometimes notice things that a lot of people, like grown-up people, just wouldn't normally do. And I do think they are so brutally honest sometimes. So when they do like your work, it does feel like the biggest pat on the back that you could get. As for what I hope people take away from my work, I think it definitely varies from piece to piece. I think I'm at a place in my artist journey at the moment where I haven't really sunk my teeth into just one theme or style of painting just yet. But I do think, especially with my work that has to do with childhood, I hope to just give people a warm feeling of nostalgia, maybe remind them of some of memories from their own childhoods that they might look back on fondly. A lot of my work, my more abstract stuff that kind of includes different motifs from different themes, I think the goal with that always is just to have someone just look at your work for an extended period of time. Because I think with those works, the longer someone looks, the more they start to notice and the more they realize little bits of pieces of clues and stories left inside the work. I definitely just want to evoke emotion in my work. Whether that's positive or negative, I personally feel is none of my business. But as long as some emotion is evoked when looking at my work, I am pretty happy with the job that I've done. Thank you so much for having me and for letting me do this interview. It was incredibly fun to look at my work and my journey as an artist in a more retrospective way than I normally get to. As for any current works I have up right now, in the Hunt Museum in Limerick, you can find my two pieces, Smuck and Puka, that I mentioned earlier. In the Origins and Harmony exhibition that is going on until the 5th of May. Online, I mainly post my work on Instagram, and that is at nika._paint. So that is nika._paints. And pretty soon over there, actually, I will be announcing that I have a print shop opening up. So if you saw any of my work today and you thought it'd be cool to own a print of it, I'll be announcing where you get that soon. Again, thank you so much for having me. This was incredibly fun. Thanks again. Bye.